Okay, let's go over our lesson today in exponents. Okay, this should be a pretty short lesson. We have one learning target. That's students can write and evaluate exponents. They're going to be talking about what exponents are and then using exponents and evaluating them and learning to write exponents. If you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be going on to the next screen. Okay, in our first screen, we're just going to talk about the different parts of what an exponent is. So we're going to focus on this top part. That's 5 to the third power. Okay, that's how you would read that, and that equals 5 times 5 times 5, which equals 125. You also could read that instead of 5 to the third power is 5 cubed. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what are the different parts of that. Well, the 5 is called our base number, and that's important to know. Now, if you'll notice that this exponent is repeated multiplication, and the base number is the number that we are multiplying over and over again. So that base number is important because that's the number that you're going to multiply in repeated multiplication. The small number in the upper right hand corner is called our exponent, and that is going to represent how many times that you multiply the base number. So we're multiplying the base number 5 3 times. So you got to know it's not 5 times 3, it's 5 multiplied to itself 3 times. The whole thing together is called a power. So 5 to the third power, that whole part right there, that's called a power. Okay, that's kind of our basics of it. Now, what we do when we multiply and you get an exponent is you multiply it out by its factors. So the factor, which is the numbers you're multiplying, is the base number. So that's 5. And the exponent tells you how many times you multiply that. So this is going to be a factor of 5 3 times. So then you multiply those, and 5 times 5 would be 25 times 5, and 25 times 5 is where I come up with my 125, which would be my simplified answer. Okay, you can also do it with variables. If I have a to the 6th power, a is my base, so I have a written over and over again. Notice that my base number is what's being repeated, and then my exponent is 6, and you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 a's that are being multiplied, and that's where I came up with that. Okay, if you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to go on to my next example. Alright, in example 1, we're going to write the product as an exponent. So what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to take this and I'm going to write it in exponent form. This is going to be pretty simple. All you have to do is identify your base number first. That is 8. And then count to see how many times you're doing repeated multiplication. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 is a factor 4 times. 8 to the 4th power. With the variables, I can do the same thing. Remember, these are called variables. I figure out my base number. That's n. And that's my factor. And how many times am I using that factor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So it's a factor 7 times. So it's n to the 7th power. And that's how you do that. Okay, if you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to example 2. In example 2, we're going to be practicing evaluating powers. So when you evaluate powers, you're first going to write it out as a factor, and how many times they're using that factor, and then you're going to write the simplified answer. So you have to show your work on these evaluating powers. So first thing I'm going to do is write it out as the factors. So 6 squared means my base number is 6, and I'm multiplying it twice, so I'm going to have 2 6's. 1, 2. Okay, 6 times 6 is 36, and that's how I'm going to do it. So I show my work by writing it out as the factors, and then I write my answer. For example B, I have 2 to the 5th power. So that's going to be the base number 2, and I'm going to have 5 of them. So I'm going to count to make sure I have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I multiply these. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. So 2 to the 5th power equals 32. And remember, you're not adding those. Remember, it's not 2 times 5. Okay, that would be 10. You're not adding 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. That would be 2 times 5. That's repeated addition. Exponents takes it to the next letter. It's repeated multiplication. So it's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So be careful when you're doing your work and you don't go too fast on these. Okay, if you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I will move on to my next example. Okay, in the last example, we're going to use variables. So it's going to be the same thing, except we're going to add that substitution step in there. So for problem A, we have a to the 3rd power. So I'm going to substitute 7 in for the a. It's going to be 7 to the 3rd power. So step 1 is my substitution. Then I'm going to write it out as the factors. So I'm going to do 7 times 7 times 7. I'm going to multiply 7 3 times. And when I multiply those, I'm going to get 343. Again, if you can't do that in your head, alright, just multiply it out. Hopefully you know 7 times 7 is 49. And then you do 49 times the other 7, the third 7. And that's going to be 3, carry the 6. 28 plus 6 is 34. And that's where my 343 comes from. Okay, so if you need to do that work off to the side, you can. Otherwise, if you can do them in your head, great. Some will be easier than others. Okay, and B, I'm going to substitute 4 in for 4. So this is going to be 4 to the 4th power. So I'm going to use a base number and I'll multiply it 4 times. Okay, again, it's not 4 times 4, so be careful. It's not 16. Then I'm going to multiply. I have 4 times 4, which is 16, times 4, which is 64, times 4, which is 256. Again, and if at any point during that process you cannot multiply that in your head, go ahead and multiply it off to the side. Alright, and that's all I have for today. If you need to go back and watch anything again, go ahead. Otherwise, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.